In an era of AI, how do you distinguish a piece of work written by the student?
We want students to learn the hard.
Good university education is one which blends the technical skills and, I'd say, the soft skills.
The desire of students to have very immediate, ready-to-use skill right after you finish.
Status first agent.
В условиях стремительного развития искусственного интеллекта система высшего образования переживает сильнейшее изменение. Какие навыки становятся ключевыми? Может ли ИИ заменить профессиональные компетенции? И чему должен учить университет? Эти вопросы мы обсуждаем с профессором Международной школы экономики Алдашевым Алишером и Джеймс Абди, ассоциированным профессором в London School of Economics.
One of the topics we wanted to discuss, and that actually continues the talk you gave today on the role of AI in education.
Yes.
So that is something, I guess, really relevant to many, and many feel kind of the urge to learn more about it. And so one of the things which I remember you telling is that it was kind of a return to the closed book examination format in the age of AI.
Purpose of a degree, offer up a signaling argument that someone goes to university, it's hard work, they get the degree to signal their abilities. In an era of AI, how do you distinguish a piece of work written by the student, written by someone else on behalf of the student, or generative AI, or some mix of all three? From a credibility perspective, how do you prove this is the student's own work? The closed book, in-person invigilated exam, you can't cheat your way, you can't chat GPT your way through such an exam. So if you perform strongly under such assessment conditions, that is a clear signal of one's ability and aptitude.
Okay. And it actually resonates with me in a way that what is really resurfacing is that the technical skills, basically, or the so-called the how thing is kind of getting replaced a little bit by the AI itself. But we want students to learn the hard intellectual work of thinking independently, and that's what is.
If you're going to write programming code, it's unlikely you're going to write it from scratch in the real world. You're going to get some Gen AI assistance. Nonetheless, you can't have complete innate trust in the quality of the AI output. Code might on the surface look good, but is it actually achieving what you want it to? Or are there going to be some nasty unintended consequences of its use if implemented? So I still feel people need an understanding of how things work, and they need those technical skills to be able to spot check, sense check, reality check. So I don't think it's replacing the need for those technical skills. I think a good university education is one which blends the technical skills and, I'd say, the soft skills.
Yep. And by the way, do you think in this new era, it's the value of really more like general intelligence is becoming more important than being specialized in one specific thing? Because really the hard specialization is something which is more replaceable rather than the general intelligence.
I've always considered, particularly UK undergraduate education, a strength of it is actually the combination of breadth and depth. No one's ever going to be an expert in everything. It's helpful to have one or two specializations, but to also see the big picture, the blend of the breadth and depth. But I still feel some specialization is beneficial.
Okay. The other thing which is at some of the core tensions we're having today is the desire of students, parents, employers, and to have very immediate, ready-to-use skill right after you finish university, whereas those skills might get outdated quickly.
When a student graduates, that's not the end of their learning journey, or it shouldn't be the end of their learning journey. I was speaking to students earlier today, the idea of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. Skills can become outdated quickly. So there is your shelf life, or there's an expiry date on the knowledge one accrues. Postgraduate education is about training students how to think and then to be proactive, seek out and learn and upskill and reskill on a need-to-know basis. But whereas in a university, you'll be guided by your instructors, your professors, the onus is on your graduates independently to seek out that knowledge and to learn things. Indeed, at LSE, while we are traditionally, we have our on-campus programs, bachelor's, master's, PhD, have entered the world of executive education, where people who perhaps graduated 5, 10, 15 or more years ago, and they want to perhaps advance their careers or maybe pivot entirely. they're in one sector and wish to reskill in a different area. So they recognize very much the need for this lifelong learning.
Okay. So I'll probably share a bit of experience. I guess you and I, we all use AI in our daily life. But, I use it a lot in my research. Mm-hmm. So I shape my ideas, I do all the estimations, I do interpretations, but it helps me to put this into coherent story, the nice, smooth read language. What I see, and I actually thought about it, I really feel it's really a complementary to me. What I was thinking is maybe this complementarity developed because my education was deprived of AI because we were from those old generation. If you use too much of AI without this cognitive hindsight, then you get easily substituted.
Yes, I am pro-Gen AI. My concern is many people will almost get addicted to it and use it, but rather as a substitute for thinking. They sort of become sort of cognitively lazy. So I feel it should be used as a sort of digital assistant. And I want students, when they graduate, to have at least some basic, let's say, AI literacy, regardless of their degree program, regardless of discipline that they've studied. What is a large language model? The ethics of the use of AI, the biases that inevitably arise from the training data. Very easy now just to go to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, your preferred AI assistant, but again, as a complementary tool and not to become over-dependent on it.
And you could think of the AI in education. What you were saying is really this personalized kind of tutoring. That's already the core of it. And also the complementary help for professors to develop the exercises and, tests and so on. But sometimes when it's superimposed, let's say from the ministry saying you need to have AI in education. Mm-hmm. And the problem is when it's superimposed, you need some metric. How do you measure whether you have it? And so it becomes really, the whole thing becomes about the visuals. And what is the visual of AI? Generated video with the artificial generic voiceover. But then this destroys the core of what is AI in education, because this is really the shower of AI.
I think possible strengths of AI in education, you mentioned sort of personalization. So when I deliver a lecture, hundreds of students in a course, it's one to many, one of me and many students. I try to pitch it to the median, but clearly it's beneficial to students. They will have their own pain points, as in certain concepts that one student doesn't understand, another one does. But then with Gen AI, they can obviously, on a student-by-student basis, just focus on the core areas where they struggle to understand. Also, when it comes to things like feedback. So we, internally at Edison and through our global programs, we are quite exam-centric. Really, students need to train well to perform well under examination conditions. So when it comes to giving, let's say, feedback to a student on whether it's an essay in the qualitative subjects, a problem set in the quantitative ones, at the human level, for the standing TA, the teaching assistant, to manually write out or type out qualitative feedback that's going to be constructed to the student, well, done well, that's going to be incredibly time-consuming. If there is a way to harness generative AI to not replace the teaching assistant, but assist, generate some personalized feedback, which then the teacher would themselves review to make sure it is suitably worded and clear, then I think the student would benefit greatly from it. And from the student's perspective, especially more in the quantitative disciplines, it's always about practice. Examinations, it's about assessing methods, really. Requests I often hear from students is they want more practice problems. Well, particularly in the quantitative space, you could use generative AI to generate many numerical variants or functional variants. It's still assessing the same primary method, but you've got almost an unlimited number of practice problems. Indeed, one of my courses internally at LSE, market research module, I have a group project component. And last year, as a pilot to see how it would work, they always have to collect what we call primary data, as in run a small survey or focus group, but inevitably it's going to be on a small sample size. It's just not feasible or pragmatic to request them to run surveys for hundreds or 1,000 or 2,000 respondents. Now they are requested to explicitly generate, let's say, synthetic data Of course, it's training them to write the right kind of prompts. So it helps with development of prompt engineering really as a skill, because the first prompt you get is really going to give you the perfect or polished answer. And say, whether it's to synthesize qualitative data in response to a focus group or quantitative data for, let's say, a survey, if you banned it, it's going to be impossible to police it. Gen AI detectors, but they're far from perfect. There'll be many false positives and false negatives. Rather than just outright ban something, I would say use it, and indeed, with the University of London LSE programs. This academic year, for modules where there is a coursework component, we explicitly permit the use of generative AI. Indeed, we actively encourage it, because they have to provide the prompts that they had used, because it's about refining and improving the output. Improving your assignment task, we'll get some output, but that's not going to be scoring a high mark. It's about refining that to achieve as close to perfection as possible.
They're coming to this idea of the courseworks or project. So that's a bit of a difficult and sensitive thing in a way, because these days, like, it's impossible to know whether the initial idea was students and AI was used as an editing tool to polish, which we all do, or it was generated from scratch by AI without any input. And I think with the if you think of, let's say, academic papers, you can spot originality. And, even if it's polished, the original idea can never come from AI. When it's the student work, which you can't expect too much originality from an undergraduate student, and it's difficult to spot.
Yes, but I mean, I counter that with in our sort of assessment mode. For our programs, we are very much exam-centric, but it is coursework. It's about really capping the weight of the coursework. So I personally quite like a sort of, let's say, a 30-70 split, 30% weight coursework, 70% weight exam. Therefore, the coursework mark, high or low, when it's only 30% weighted, it's not going to be too impactful on the final grade of the course. A very competent student is going to perform well in the coursework and the exam as well, allowing them to get a very high mark overall. And frankly, in the real world, in a job, people are not day by day doing tasks just to sit an exam. They are going to be doing practical things, applied things. And having coursework, I think, is an appropriately designed coursework task is doing its best to simulate kinds of things they may have to do in the real world. I appreciate there will be issues of what's feasible in practice, but one could consider with any coursework task, because if it's a student's own work, you should be able to speak about it freely and with confidence and with credibility. If you have completely effectively outsourced your work either to a ghostwriter or an AI, or maybe a combination of the two, and then you have to speak about question on your work, well, we would struggle to give a convincing answer. Originality, it does tend to shine through. If I get an email, I can just tell from the tone of the email, is it US generated? Yeah. I mean, I just put it through the AI detector anyway for fun, and I know it's not perfect, but you can tell when someone bothered to write an authentic email.
Or a student recommendation.
Yes.
By the way, in terms of those things like Turnitin, they are good in spotting if you copied, parts of text from somewhere. And then they do have this AI detection thing, but I guess the AI detection cannot differentiate between AI edited your own text versus generated AI from scratch.
Many viewers may be familiar with Turnitin, and many have a misconception about what it is. They think it's like a plagiarism detection device. It's really a text matching device. Yeah. And some students handing over the percentage, the similarity percentages. I think there's a magic number. Anything above that bad, anything below it good. So they keep refining until they just get below what they think is at that magic threshold. Which you have a very high similarity score, and there'd be no plagiarism, provided you've properly cited all of your references. But, so while it perhaps wouldn't constitute plagiarism, if it's a very high similarity percentage, it calls into question the extent of originality on the student's part. But to your point on the AI detection, I would say it's a work in progress. I would say I don't think there's sufficient confidence in the accuracy of it to fairly deploy it.
And as it stands so far, it's probably the AI detection is probably relevant these days, because if your text which you write initially is being polished, it becomes AI detectable, basically. And also, I'm sorry, the other things like the general standards they apply for certain works, like student thesis should be at least 30-50 pages. With AI, it's becoming really relevant. it could fill space. This cups.
So also like when students are applying for like a master's degree and they need a personal statement for the application. I'm sure some may be tempted to use AI. This is a starting point. Don't touch it at all. I think a master's admissions officer is going to detect, is it genuinely the applicant's own words, and that the authenticity at the human level, you've got a sense about.
So there is the pressing question to you, given your
I'm not
experience.
prepared for this one. It's like, here we go.
I mean, given your teaching experience in many places, and also you're meeting with our students every year, basically. Any detectable difference between students here and elsewhere, or in Britain, that you feel?
I would say not on a sort of cross-sectional basis. Like if I'm, let's say this year, students in one country versus another. I do sense though a bit of a difference across time in more of a longitudinal dimension. And whether it's the cause or not, I was thinking that the pandemic, clearly it disrupted students' education for a good 2 to 3 years, that whether they were at school at university at the time. And it was highly disruptive. And although the pandemic's in the rearview mirror, I sense there's a very long tail effect of that in education, which will, I think, diminish over time, but I still see at least some residual impact from it. For example, if you are socially distancing or you're under lockdown conditions, it would have impacted one's ability to in-person communication skills, especially for, let's say, I'm thinking of toddlers, infants, which I'm guessing that those are the sort of the years when you're really starting to first engage with other human beings. And for that cohort, as it were, would they ever genuinely be able to fully catch up? I suspect there's going to be this very long tail behavior. And the soft skills I was mentioning earlier, which I feel like are super important for the workplace, which a good 2 to 3 years of social distancing or that interruption to a normal educational experience, I think that has also a bit of a deficit.
Okay, James, thank you very much. We had a really interesting conversation about so many things.
Сегодняшний разговор показал, в эпоху искусственного интеллекта важнейшим становится мыслить, адаптироваться и учиться на протяжении всей жизни. Благодарю нашего гостя Джеймс Абди и ведущего Алдашева Алишера. Спасибо, что были с нами. Если вам понравился подкаст, ставьте лайки и подписывайтесь на наш официальный канал.